Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It's been another month and a new list of movies that I get to gush over in this edition of What I Watched This Month, June edition. God, that was awful. What am I doing with my... As always, you can check my most up-to-date lists and entries on Letterboxd. But now, on with the video. To start out the month, I watched Heathers, directed by Michael Lehmann. Okay, so to be perfectly honest, I have not seen any of Winona Ryder's work except for maybe Beetlejuice, but boy does that need to change. She radiates this magnetic charm that's absolutely endearing. Both Winona and Christian Slater pull off amazing and memorable performances in a film that is one of the most iconic and clever movies that I've seen come from the 80s. I actually admire Mean Girls, but it has nothing on Heathers. I feel like this film isn't talked about enough in the greats that come from the 80s. I mean, the one-liners are iconic, the characters are practically timeless, and the controversial content is sadly relevant, but nonetheless ahead of its time. I could go on and on with the praises, but honestly, just go watch the movie. Next, I watched Drinking Buddies, directed by Joe Swanberg. I was expecting more of a comedy with this film, but it ended up being one of the most interesting and honest displays of the complexities of human connections and relationships. I thought the chemistry between the entire cast was phenomenal and really believable. Of course, the standouts being Olivia Wilde and Jake Johnson. I heard a lot of the dialogue was actually improvised, and if that's true, that's amazing, because there were so many times where I actually felt like I was in the moment. Whether that's the feeling of awkwardness or jealousy, or just having a good time with friends, this film forces the viewer into a very visceral experience, and I really enjoyed it. My only gripe is, by the time you get to the end, it hardly feels like things have truly affected the characters. There wasn't a whole lot of growth from beginning to end, which was kind of, a bit unsatisfying. Next, I watched Groundhog Day, directed by Harold Ramis, and wow, this is like the ultimate feel-good, heartfelt, genuine comedy / romance movie I've ever seen. While this could technically be defined as a time travel movie, it sets itself apart by taking its time developing not only the story, but Bill Murray's character as well. And boy does he do like a complete 180. I don't really have anything negative to say about this movie aside from it feeling a bit dated, but it's kind of expected with the movie made in '93. This is just a good time, and it's probably one of my favorite Bill Murray movies now. Next, I watched Hunt for the Wilder People, directed by Taika Waititi. I have been exploring more of Taika's work since Thor Ragnarok and with the more recent Jojo Rabbit, and I gotta say, I have not been disappointed so far. What We Do in the Shadows was a laugh-out-loud hilarious movie, and Jojo Rabbit was a surprisingly emotional satire on Nazi Germany. Taika has shown great range in what he's able to accomplish emotionally on screen, but I feel like Hunt for the Wilder People is kind of the best of both worlds. The cinematography is pretty much a tourist video because the beauty of New Zealand landscapes is on full display here, and Taika gives us one of the most endearing partner / buddy stories ever told. Julian Dennison is surprisingly charming, and Sam Neill plays the reluctant caretaker role to a T. It was heartwarming to see the progression of their relationship in the film, and the balance between sad teary-eyed moments to gut-bursting laughing moments was near perfect. If you like Korg from Thor Ragnarok or any of Taika's work really, please watch this film. Next, I had the pleasure of watching Goodfellas, a Scorsese classic, and boy, all the praise this film gets is rightfully deserved. There's nothing left to be said that hasn't already been said. It's a masterpiece, the creme de la creme. Every performance is near flawless, the characters in their unique way are memorable, and the story is absolutely fascinating, especially being based on true events. From a technical standpoint, this is near perfect. I think pacing wise, this is my favorite Scorsese film. With all that being said, it really pains me not to give this a 5 out of 5. And while I feel like attributing that to the fact that I watched Wolf of Wall Street before this, and they kind of hit a lot of the same beats, with my preference leaning more towards Wolf of Wall Street, but to be honest, I feel like there was something lacking from Ray Liotta's character. I don't think that's any fault to Liotta because, I mean, he was phenomenal. But for being the main character, his parts were constantly being dwarfed in every scene he shared, which I think explains why the ending kind of disappointed me. Like, that's it? That's the note you want to end on after all they've been through? I don't know. It wasn't as satisfying as Wolf of Wall Street. Next, I watched Melancholy, directed by Lars Van Trier. And boy, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Don't get me wrong, I don't think it's a secret that this is a really depressing film, but I really had to sit on this one to understand my full thought. I love how personal and earnest this film deals with those themes of depression, anxiety, and the incoherence of it all, and I think the manipulation of time was clever and really effectively plays with the audience's emotions. And I also love the juxtaposition between the two sisters. I mean, this is easily the best Kirsten Dunst performance I've seen to date, but this film isn't without its flaws. There are plenty of moments of confusion or lack of narrative that kind of take me out of the film, and the camera work got to the point where it seemed a bit excessive. I'm sure Lars Van Trier had purpose for every moment and shot, and while I think this film isn't here to make a definitive stance or statement on depression, but rather to be an experience on how it feels, but I don't know. It might be one of those films that it might take another watch to kind of click and grasp the full picture. Next, I watched Sex Drive, directed by Sean Anders, and okay, now hear me out. I kind of fell in love with Clark Duke as a comedic actor after seeing him in Hot Tub Time Machine, and even to a lesser degree when he was in The Office. So when I saw that he was in this movie along with James Marsden and Seth Green, I was intrigued. Plus, I love road trip movies. This film, as ridiculous as it is actually coherent. And even though I think the main protagonist kind of looks like Alan Cummings' son, and James Marsden's character is a bit problematic and hasn't really aged well, but from the aforementioned unexpected casting and the 2000s raunchy road trip film to boot, I kind of liked it. Amanda Crew was also surprisingly good, and I loved every scene with Seth Green in it. Plus, Fall Out Boy was in this? What? Why wasn't I aware of this while I was in high school? There's a lot of flaws with this film to nitpick, but I really had a great time, and I'm willing to overlook those things like casting Clark Duke as a weirdly overconfident character who a majority of the females in this film are attracted to, and also at times the over-the-top raunchiness. This film is exactly what you would expect, and I'll say it here first, it officially enters my guilty pleasure list. Next, I watched The Sisters Brothers, directed by Jacques Audiard. I'm probably saying that wrong. I gotta say, while I'm not too keen on westerns and the casting decisions kind of threw me off, the first half of this film kind of cemented that idea. After Jake Gyllenhaal and Joaquin Phoenix finally meet up, I really started to enjoy this film. And John C. Reilly was surprisingly good. The chemistry between the cast was fun, eccentric, and really entertaining. And I may be alone in saying this, but the way the second half of this film was made, it really gave me, as weird as it is to say this, Holes vibe. But yeah, from the performances to the camera work and editing, it gave off feelings of warm nostalgia for a time period I had little to no knowledge on. And that's really all I have to say. It was fun. I'll give it that. Next, I watched No Strings Attached, directed by Ivan Reitman. There is something about rom-coms that star two extremely attractive people that kind of hit the spot, but this felt really empty. Both Kutcher and Portman are entertaining enough, but the story is severely lacking. At no point was there a reasonable problem in the film. Everything felt like it was forced into a climax, no pun intended, but yeah. I never really cared about anyone in this film. In fact, I would even say I found Jake Johnson and Greta Gerwig's relationship in this movie to be far more entertaining than the intended one. But this film was very cliche, and while most have gone on to have more meaningful careers, I could have gone without watching them in this film. Next, I watched Highrise, directed by Ben Wheatley. I really wanted to like this film, I really did. In my mind, it was supposed to be like a mix between Snowpiercer and Lord of the Flies. And while, yeah, it did take after certain elements of those two films, but the climax was severely underwhelming. Don't get me wrong, this is a thought-provoking and beautifully shot film, but from the peak of the film to its conclusion, it was extremely messy. It felt like either it didn't get crazy enough or it had no sense of direction and it kind of just lingered on. On a more positive note, I really enjoyed the performances and the aesthetic, along with the commentary on societal hierarchy, but again, I prefer films like Parasite and Snowpiercer. Next, I watched The Art of Self-Defense, directed by Riley Stearns. I am really glad I went into this film blind. There are connections to Fight Club, but I feel like this is a slightly less comedic and somehow darker version. I really liked the way this film was shot and the more on the nose interpretation of toxic masculinity, along with the incredibly dark humor and unsuspecting twists and turns. I feel like it should be given with any film, but it felt more so with this one, but it really gets better the further you watch. I don't want to give away too much, but this film really subverted my expectations. Next, I watched I'm Just With You, directed by Adam Mason. I was completely unaware of Hulu's Into the Dark series, but honestly I just wanted to watch this just based on the poster alone. There's something about the neon color and okay, look, there's nothing I want to talk about this film. It's not bad, per se, but it's extremely mediocre. And so far, it's the best film out of the series that I've seen. I just wanted to do a video of Into the Dark series, but now I'm having second thoughts on not just that video idea, but my sanity. Next, I watched Blazing Saddles, directed by Mel Brooks. This is a ridiculously silly movie, and the further you watch, the crazier it gets. Personally, the more grounded scenes with parody sprinkled in are my favorite, but when things begin to get a little too meta and out of control is where the film loses me. Gene Wilder and Cleavon Little are easily the best aspects of this film, and even if I feel like I have outgrown slapstick and parody comedies, Mel Brooks always manages to make me laugh. This is just a good time. Next, I watched Crawlers, directed by Brandon Zuck, and yeah, this is just a continuation from my Into the Dark series review, and yeah, this is a lot worse than the last one. Next, I watched If Beale Street Could Talk, directed by Barry Jenkins, and wow, I love Barry's other movie, Moonlight, and this is just another reason to put him in my list of top working directors. This is beautiful, patient, and painfully honest, a true masterclass in directing, performing, and the execution of cinematography and editing. Jenkins' ability to put together intimate moments in a meaningful way to extract every single emotion possible is unmatched. Coupled with composer Nicholas Brittle's score, Jenkins creates visceral and immersive scenes that bring to light the hard-to-swallow truth and the message this film portrays: racial injustice and systematically corrupt justice systems. Of course, this film is so much more than just a moral and political stance, even though I wouldn't say political. I don't think that's the right way of putting it. But it shows the life and hardships that is the reality that people in the modern world still face. It's frustrating and sad, and this film absolutely gets it. Next, I cried my eyes out to Dear Zachary, a letter to a son about his father, directed by Kurt Quinn. I've been hearing a lot about this film from people close to me and multiple sources that I follow, and I gotta say, everything that is said is true. I don't think I have the words to properly describe how emotional and heart-wrenching this film is. To watch the celebration of life only to have it ripped away from you just tears you up. I have zero faults with the film. It perfectly executes the story and emotion that comes along with it. The ability to get an audience to not only sympathize but rather empathize with the content is incredible. Next, I rewatched You Don't Mess with the Zohan, directed by Dennis Dugan. I probably haven't watched this movie since the year that it released, and yeah, this is absolutely ridiculous, but it's hard for me to look at movies I loved as a child objectively. On one hand, this film has a pretty lazy narrative and an overabundance of editing flaws, but on the other hand, it's a stupidly fun and idiotic Adam Sandler movie, and I actually like Sandler in this film, but then again, I always think it's nice to watch Adam Sandler not play Adam Sandler. Other than that, I think the over-reliance on special effects, most which have not aged well, was a misstep, and honestly, this felt like a bunch of random scenes stitched together to make a semi-cohesive narrative. On the bright side, it's not boring. Next, I watched Monty Python and the Holy Grail, directed by Terry Gilliam and Terry Jones, and it's pretty easy to see the influence this had on films and comedy in general. Is it a classic? Yeah. Does it live up to the hype everyone puts on its name? Not really. While there are scenes that are hilarious and memorable, and it does boast a well thought out script, there are scenes that seem to linger on too long. Scenes where perhaps a better camera angle or shot would have helped. And while I do appreciate the sense of humor, it unfortunately lacks in having a narrative structure or character development. I know those things aren't always important in terms of a comedy movie, but by me not being a fan of the comedy group to begin with, it kind of hampered on my experience understanding of who's playing who. It's not perfect, but it's really fun. And finally, I watched Between Two Ferns, directed by Scott Aukerman, and I was disappointed. I really liked the short series on Funny or Die, but I think deep down I knew this wouldn't work being expanded into a film length. The motivation is easy enough to get behind, but at the end it's kind of ignored and rendered unimportant, which kind of makes the whole thing redundant. None of the jokes actually land, except for a few scenes that are actually like the show where Zach interviews celebrities, and that just kind of reinforces my previous statement. But yeah, this is really boring, and I actually laughed more at the blooper credits than I did at the whole film, and I think that says a lot. And that's what I watched for the month of June. There were a lot of duds for me, so I have a whole lot more set for next month, which I'm pretty excited for. Plus, I should have more time to knock out more movies, so hopefully stick around for that. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
Cartier